The morning sun crawled over the eastern ridge, casting long shadows across the frost-covered meadow. Martha Brennan stood on her cabin porch, a steaming cup of chicory coffee warming her weathered hands. At 38, she had lived alone on this mountain slope for nearly 7 years now, and the folks down in Copper Creek had plenty to say about it. "That Brennan woman," they'd whisper in the general store, voices dropping low when talk turned to her. "Never took another man after losing her family. Lives up there like some hermit, won't let nobody past her door." Martha knew what they said. She heard the hush that fell when she stepped into Muller's store once a month for supplies. The men would tip their hats polite enough, but their wives clutched their shawls tighter, as if solitude were something you could catch like sickness. Truth was, Martha preferred it that way. Her small holding provided everything she needed: a vegetable garden that caught the morning sun, a dozen hens that laid regular, 2 milk cows, and her mother's old knowledge of every healing herb that grew wild on the mountainside. The cabin wasn't much, a single room with a stone fireplace and a bed behind a worn calico curtain. But it was strong. Her late husband, James, had built it with his own hands before the fever took him and their 3 children in one cruel winter. Now it stood like a monument to everything she'd endured and refused to surrender. She sipped her coffee and watched her breath cloud in the cold air. The first frost meant it was time to finish the harvest, pull the last carrots, store the squash, and pack her root cellar before the Montana snows arrived. Living alone meant doing both a man's work and a woman's, but she'd grown strong from it. Her hands, once soft from sewing and cradling babies, were calloused from axe handles and plow reins. "Morning, Buttercup," she called to her yellow cow, who lowed in answer from the small barn. The rhythm of her chores brought peace. Feed the chickens, mend the fence, split the wood. Work left little room for grief, and she liked it that way. While collecting eggs, her thoughts wandered to the letter tucked inside her Bible, another from her sister Rose back east. Rose's neat handwriting always came with the same message: "You're still young enough, Martha. Find another husband. Don't waste away alone." Martha had snorted at that, same as always. Rose didn't know what it meant to bury a husband and 3 children within a month's time. Didn't know what it was like to sit beside their graves through the first snowfall, praying to die but still waking up each morning because the animals needed feeding. No, Rose didn't understand at all. By noon, Martha had filled 2 baskets with late squash and hung bundles of sage and yarrow from the rafters to dry. When she went to split kindling, she heard it. Horses on the trail below. Her hand froze on the axe handle. Visitors were rare, and rarely good news. 2 riders appeared through the trees. Tom Harper and his boy Luke from the Double J Ranch. Their spread bordered her land to the south. Tom had courted her briefly the first year after James died, bringing fresh beef and offers to help with the heavy work. She'd turned him away, gentle but firm, and he'd married the widow Carlson instead. "Afternoon, Mrs. Brennan," Tom called, tipping his hat. The boy, now near 16, stayed silent beside him. "Mr. Harper," Martha said evenly, not lowering the axe. "Something I can do for you?" "Just passing through. Checking the fence line. Thought we'd see if you needed anything before the snow flies." "I manage fine, thank you." Tom shifted in his saddle, uneasy. "Ma'am, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but there's talk in town. That new preacher, Reverend Dalton, he's been saying things about women living alone, improper-like." Martha's jaw tightened. "And what business is it of his or anyone else's how I live?" "None in my mind," Tom said quickly. "But some of the men been drinking and talking foolish, saying maybe you need looking after, whether you want it or not." The words hung heavy in the cold air. Martha had heard this kind of talk before. A woman living alone was either a witch or a temptation. The fact she'd never taken another man to her bed seemed to offend them most of all. "I appreciate the warning, Mr. Harper," she said, her tone flat. "But I've got a Henry rifle and know how to use it. Any man comes up here uninvited will learn that quick enough." Tom nodded, unsurprised. "I figured as much. Just wanted you to know me and a few others. We don't hold with forcing things on folks." When they rode off, Martha stood watching the trail long after they vanished. 7 years she'd kept this place running. 7 years she'd healed townsfolk when they came sick or hurt, traded herbs and vegetables for goods she couldn't make herself. She'd proven a woman could survive alone, but Tom's warning left a chill deeper than the autumn wind. She carried water from the spring, built up her fire, and set beans to soak for the next day. The chores steadied her, though her thoughts kept circling back to the preacher and the men with too much whiskey and too little sense. After supper, she took down her husband's rifle, checked its action, counted the ammunition. The metal felt heavy but reassuring. She'd defended her home before, against claim jumpers, drifters, and loneliness itself. Outside, wolves called across the valley, their howls echoing through the cold. Martha listened without fear. The mountain spoke in many voices, and she knew them all. The cry of hawks, the rustle of deer, the whisper of wind through pine. They were her company now. When she banked the fire for the night, she paused to study the moonlight spilling through her window. The silver glow made the cabin seem softer, almost alive. Let them talk down in Copper Creek. Let the preacher preach. She'd carved her life out of this wilderness and wasn't about to give it up. She undressed, slipped into her nightgown, and lay beneath the old wedding ring quilt her husband had once made. The bed felt cold, vast, and familiar. She'd long stopped expecting it to be otherwise. Tomorrow, she told herself, she'd ride into town, show her face, remind them she was just a woman living quiet, not a ghost or a sin. But for tonight, Martha Brennan slept as she had for 7 long years, alone, but on her own terms. The October wind cut sharp across the valley as Samuel McKenna guided his horse through the herd, counting cattle one last time before driving them down to the lower pasture. At 43, Sam had been working this land longer than most men in the county had been alive. His face was lean and lined, his hands calloused, his eyes the pale gray of storm clouds that never cleared. "That's 312, he called to his hired hand, young Pete Olson. "Same as yesterday." Pete nodded, pulling his coat tighter. "Getting cold early this year, Mr. McKenna? Think we'll see snow before November?" "Likely so," Sam replied, squinting at the clouds gathering over the western peaks. He'd been reading this sky for more than 2 decades, learning its moods like a man learns a wife's silences. Though he'd only had 8 years to learn his wife, Clara, before the accident took her and their little girl, Emma. The memory still caught him sideways sometimes, sharp as a knife. Clara's laugh, Emma's small hands clutching his shirt. Gone in a heartbeat. He shook off the thought, motioning Pete toward the drive gate. "Go ahead, get them moving. I'll catch up." Sam watched the boy ride off, green and eager, same as he'd once been before war, before loss, before he learned how much a man could lose and still keep breathing. Folks in Copper Creek called him a hard man. And maybe they were right. He worked from dawn till dark, spoke little, smiled less. What was there to smile about in an empty house? His ranch, the Rocking M, sat 4 miles north of town, bordered by the Double J on one side and the Lonely Mountain, where that Brennan woman lived on the other. Sam had seen her a few times in town, a strong-looking woman, plain in a proud way, always alone. People talked about her too, though not the same way they talked about him. A man alone was just gruff. A woman alone was a scandal. By sundown, Pete had the herd settled. Sam fed his horse, the old gelding buck, brushing the dust from his coat. The barn smelled of hay and leather, an honest smell. He'd long given up on dogs or company. When his old cattle dog died, it hurt worse than it should have. Better to need nothing. He ladled stew into a bowl and ate standing by the window, staring at the land he'd built with his bare hands. It was good land, strong land, but it felt empty without laughter in it. When he finally turned in, the house was silent, save for the wind whispering under the eaves. Clara's things were gone, packed away that first winter when the ache was too raw, her sewing basket, Emma's doll. All of it stored in the attic, out of sight, but never truly out of reach. He slept lightly, same as always. Years of habit made that a mercy. The next morning broke brittle with frost. Sam and Pete spent the day mending fence lines, the wire cold enough to sting their fingers. Pete talked about the dance coming up at the Grange Hall, which girls might attend, and whether his saved wages would buy a new shirt. "You going to the dance, Mr. McKenna?" Sam gave a dry snort. "Dancing's for young fools." "Weren't you young once?" Pete grinned. "Different times." He didn't explain that he'd danced plenty, once, spinning Clara around the floor while her yellow hair caught the lamplight. That memory felt like it belonged to another man. Late that afternoon, Tom Harper rode up, hat pulled low against the wind. "Storm brewing," he said by way of greeting. "Thought you should know." Sam nodded. "I've seen the sky." Tom dismounted, his expression uneasy. "Words going around about Martha Brennan. That new preacher's been stirring things up, saying a woman alone invites trouble. I don't hold with that nonsense, but some of the men been drinking heavy." Sam's jaw tightened. "She can handle herself." "I reckon so," Tom agreed. "But talk can turn to action faster than you'd think. Just keep your ears open." Quote. After Tom rode off, Sam kept working, though his thoughts wouldn't settle. The Brennan woman again. Always talk about her. He understood solitude better than most. Understood the kind of peace and ache that came with it. But a woman living alone in these parts, that was different. Folks didn't forgive independence easily. By nightfall, the wind had picked up. Sam checked the sky one last time before bedding down the stock. The air felt charged, thick with the scent of snow. When the first flakes started to fall, he built the fire high, poured himself a drink, and tried not to think about the woman on the mountain facing the same storm alone. He lasted until near midnight before the banging started, the barn doors slamming in the wind. Cursing, he pulled on his coat and stepped outside. The storm hit like a hammer. Wind howled. Snow drove sideways, cutting his face like glass. He could barely see 10 feet ahead. He fought his way to the barn, forcing the doors closed against the gale. The horses were wild-eyed, stomping and sweating. He calmed them one by one, murmuring low, until the noise outside grew louder than any prayer. Then Buck reared, broke the stall latch, and bolted into the storm. "Damn it!" Sam shouted, lunging after him. He couldn't leave the horse out there. Buck had carried him through floods, blizzards, and broken trails. A man didn't abandon loyalty like that. Snow swallowed the world. He followed the dark shape of the horse until it vanished into the white. He called out, voice torn away by the wind. Time blurred. Minutes! Hours! He couldn't tell. His boots filled with snow, his hands went numb. Just when he thought he'd have to stop, he caught a faint glow ahead. A window. Yellow light cutting through the storm like salvation itself. He stumbled toward it, dragging frozen limbs, the gelding's reins clutched in one hand. When he reached the cabin, he could barely lift his arm to knock. "Hello," he rasped. "Anyone there?" A shadow moved behind the curtain, the door cracked open, and a woman's face appeared, pale, startled, framed by a rifle barrel. Martha Brennan. "My horse," Sam managed through chattering teeth. "Lost Storm." She looked past him to where Buck stood shivering, then back to his frostbitten face. Something flickered in her eyes. Calculation, caution, then decision. "Get in here before you freeze to death." He staggered inside. Warmth hit him like pain. She took his coat, guided him to the fire, and pressed a steaming mug into his shaking hands. Whiskey and coffee. It burned all the way down. "Your feet," she said briskly, kneeling beside him. "They're near gone. This'll hurt." He didn't argue. He couldn't. She rubbed his feet with rough cloths until agony returned. The kind of pain that meant life clawing its way back. "There's dry clothes in that trunk," she said, pointing to the corner. "They were my husband's. You need to get out of those wet things." Sam hesitated, decency and pride warring with common sense. But she'd already turned her back, giving him privacy. When he was dressed, she placed a bowl of stew in front of him. "Eat?" He obeyed. The food tasted like warmth itself. After a while, he found his voice. "I should bed down in the barn." "That lean-to barely fits your horse," she said sharply. "You'd be dead by morning. You'll sleep by the fire." "I can't." "Mr. McKenna," she interrupted, "we're both grown and widowed. There's nothing improper in surviving the night." He gave a weary nod. "Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. Call me Martha." The storm howled outside. The fire crackled inside. Two souls who had spent years alone now shared a silence that was strangely gentle. "Mrs. Martha," Sam said quietly, staring into the flames. "Folks say things about you, about how you live." Her voice came calm and steady. "Folks say plenty about both of us, Mr. McKenna. Doesn't make it true." He almost smiled. As the night deepened and the storm battered the cabin, Sam realized it had been a long, long time since he'd felt the warmth of another person's voice. And Martha Brennan, the woman no man ever reached, had just saved his life. The fire had burned low, casting orange light across the cabin walls. Outside, the storm raged like a living thing, wind howling around the eaves and snow beating against the shutters. Inside, Sam McKenna lay on a pallet near the fire, wrapped in borrowed blankets. Across the small room, behind a curtain of faded calico, Martha Brennan moved quietly, tending the flames, refilling the kettle, checking that her guests still breathed. "Can't sleep either?" she asked softly when she noticed his eyes open. "Not much," Sam admitted. "Your floor's hard as granite." Martha smiled faintly. "Old bones don't take kindly to floors. That bed of mine's big enough for two, and we're not children to make a fuss over what's proper. You'll sleep better there." Sam hesitated. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure. The wind may blow the roof clean off before morning. We've no time for foolish pride." She pulled back the curtain, revealing the simple bed with its patchwork quilt. "We can put a quilt between us if it makes you feel more decent," she said matter-of-factly. Sam sat up slowly, joints stiff from cold. "All right then, just till morning." Quote. He lay down on one side while Martha settled carefully on the other. The bed dipped beneath their weight, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Outside, the storm shrieked, but inside the small cabin there was only the sound of breathing, hers steady, his uneven. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Martha's voice came quiet in the dark. "Your wife? What was she like?" Sam stared at the low ceiling, watching firelight flicker through the cracks in the curtain. "Clara was sunshine, always laughing, always seeing the good in things. Said I was the first man who ever listened when she talked." "She sounds kind," Martha said. She was. "Our daughter, too. Emma. She was only 7 when—" He stopped, voice catching. Martha didn't press. "My husband James was quiet," she said after a while. "Could fix anything with his hands. He built this place, board by board. Brought me wildflowers every spring, said they reminded him of my smile." Sam turned slightly toward her. "You lost them all at once?" Martha nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Fever took my children one by one. Then James. I buried them myself. Thought I'd follow before winter was through. But the body has a stubborn will to live even when the heart doesn't." Sam's throat tightened. "You've got strength, Martha. More than most men I know." "It's not strength," she said softly. "Just the only choice left." Quote. They fell quiet again, grief and understanding filling the space between them. After a long silence, Sam said, "Why don't you remarry? You could have your pick of men if you wanted." Martha gave a short, humorless laugh. "Tom Harper asked once. Good man. But when he took my hand, all I could think was how different it felt from James's. Wrong, somehow. I couldn't pretend." Sam nodded. "Tried once myself. The widow Patterson over in Cedar Falls. Nice woman, but I kept comparing her to Clara. Nothing she did felt right, because she wasn't her. I quit calling after that." "Better to be lonely than dishonest," Martha said quietly. The fire crackled. The storm beat on. Two people who'd chosen solitude now found themselves bound by it. Sam shifted, voice low. "I heard the preacher's been talking about you, stirring the men up." Martha sighed. He's been saying a woman alone invites temptation, that I'm unnatural, that I need a husband to keep me right. That preacher's a fool, Sam said flatly. You've done more good here than he ever will in that pulpit. She smiled at that, a real smile, tired but genuine. You're kind, Mr. McKenna. Sam, he said, if we're sharing a bed in a blizzard, might as well drop the formality. All right then, she said softly. Sam. The sound of his name on her lips stirred something he hadn't felt in years. Not desire, but recognition. The simple comfort of being seen. They lay quiet again, the rolled quilt between them more symbol than barrier. Sometimes, Martha said, the loneliness builds up like snow on a roof. Too much weight, and something's bound to give. Sam stared at the shadows on the ceiling. I know that feeling. All those silent nights, nothing but the fire for company. Thought I was strong for bearing it. Maybe I was just too scared to feel again. Quote, the wind screamed outside, shaking the cabin walls, but neither flinched. Storm's easing, Martha murmured after a while. Maybe. Sam's voice was soft, but storms have a way of coming back. When dawn came pale and cold, the world outside lay buried under a thick white blanket. Sam rose early, checking Buck in the lean-to and clearing snow from the door. Martha watched him from the hearth, her shawl pulled tight, something unreadable in her eyes. You'll be heading home soon, she said. I should, he answered, but I wanted to thank you before I go. You already did. He hesitated, hat in hand. Martha, if I came calling sometime, not courting, just to talk, maybe help with the heavy work, would that be all right? Her gaze met his. For a moment she didn't answer, then said, I don't know. I've gotten used to my walls. I understand walls, he said. I know you do, she smiled faintly. But you're welcome to try. The storm had forced them together, but choice would decide what came next. Sam mounted his horse, tipping his hat. You take care, Martha. Quote, and you, Sam. He rode down the mountain slowly, snow crunching under Buck's hooves, the cabin shrinking behind him. He'd left a piece of something there. Maybe loneliness, maybe fear. Days passed. Word spread fast in Copper Creek. By the time Sam came to town for feed, whispers were flying. Folks said he'd spent the night in Martha Brennan's cabin. Some called it scandal. Others called it sin. He ignored them all until Sunday, when Reverend Dalton took the pulpit. The sermon was about virtue and temptation, about women who lead men astray. Dalton's gaze found Sam in the crowd, then slid to Martha sitting alone in the back pew. That was enough. Sam stood and walked out, slamming the church doors behind him. Outside, Tom Harper followed. Sam, wait! Talk spreading fast, Tom said. Some of the men are saying Martha needs a husband to keep her proper. Or maybe the law should decide for her. Sam's jaw clenched. They threatening her? Not yet, but it's turning ugly. Sam didn't wait for more. He rode straight for the mountain, snow spraying from Buck's hooves. Martha was in her yard, chopping wood when he arrived. She looked up, eyes calm but wary. Figured you'd come, she said. Heard the talk. Then you know it's bad, Sam said. Some men rode by your trail. You seen them? Quote, I have, watching from the ridge. You shouldn't be here alone. I've been alone for 7 years, she said evenly. I can handle gossip. This ain't gossip anymore, Martha. It's a threat. She lowered the axe. What do you propose? That I stay, at least till this dies down. Sam, you know what they'll say. They already said it, he replied. Might as well give them something worth talking about. For a moment, she just stared at him, something flickering in her expression. Fear, defiance, maybe something softer. You're a stubborn man, Sam McKenna. Been called worse. She sighed, shaking her head. Fine, but you're splitting that wood if you're staying. He smiled faintly. Yes, ma'am. By nightfall, the fire was warm, the chores done, and outside the snow began again. Soft this time, gentle. Inside the cabin, 2 people sat across from each other, no longer strangers, no longer afraid of the silence. The preacher's storm had forced them together, same as the one that brought him to her door. And maybe, just maybe, the walls they'd both built for survival had finally met their match. It wasn't youth's kind of love. It was quieter, earned, built from pain and choice. As the snow fell outside, Sam reached across the table and took Martha's hand. "Storm's past," he said. "Maybe," Martha answered softly. "Or maybe it's just beginning." And for the first time in 7 years, Martha Brennan didn't mind.